Thanks for bearing with me and bearing with us. I'm very glad to see so many of you at that early moment of the day, at this much of a rain. I'm glad that you haven't taken the Marina's advice to have more coffee. That means that you're up and ready, hopefully, to listen to me. Few words about myself. My name is Sergei. My second name is Balabonin. And for those of you who are not Russian-speaking or uninitiated, my second name is easily translated to English as Bla-Bla-Bonin, like literally. I came here to Estonia a couple of years ago from Moscow, where I've been involved in doing ads for roughly 20 years. And although I still like it, it became somewhat predictable. So I decided it's time to move on to find new tracks, and I took my family and went here to study in Tallinn University the interaction design, which I still do. Unfortunately, I'm a Vtorogodnik, whatever, the second, the third year arrested development master student. We are here to talk about chaos. There will be a mishmash of quotes and other found objects, including popular facts and other trivia. Like, for example, chaos is actually a very healthy thing. Take heart. A healthy one always has some fluctuations to its activity, while a heart which has strictly repetitive cycle is under risk of stroke rather sooner than later. Likewise, a person who is mentally less flexible, who is repetitive and mechanical, is doomed to have a behavior which will be increasingly obsessional and neurotic. Apart from the wisdom bits like this one I've just mentioned, please expect loads of slogans and some light-hearted, mindless ranting, but all in defense of chaos. You may ask why chaos needs my or anyone's defense. Well, because most of us approach chaos with just two basic attitudes. Because after thousands of years of human civilization, and especially the last few decades of it, we are now primed and conditioned to either fear and loathe chaos, or diminish its importance and ignore it completely, for being too ubiquitous and too banal to pay any attention to. Today we will try to answer three crucial questions. Why are we afraid of chaos? Why do they think that chaos is not important? And how can we make more use of chaos? So why indeed we are afraid of chaos? The answer to this is actually pretty simple. Because we humans tend to oversimplify things. Earlier in our history, because there was not a lot of information available. Today, because we are so apparently overloaded with information of all kinds.
To the untrained, it appears as chaos. But here, there is only mastery. A creation so complex, only few can reveal it. Through mastery comes harmony. Hennessy VSOP privilege. Never stop. Never settle.
Our media environment packages the real complexities of life, such as forces of nature or human interactions, into sound bites and images that evoke simplified emotions and responses. A specific instance of this whole simplification thing is dualism or binary thinking. We endlessly package the world into opposing dualities. Expecting things to be either simple or complex is one example. Objectivity and subjectivity, my view versus your view. Order and randomness. Control versus uncertainty. This binary perspective makes us believe that the world is constantly swinging between order and chaos. And because of larger simplifications, we often use words like chaos or chaotic to label something we can't control or don't understand or don't care to understand. Interestingly enough, initially chaos as a term meant something else entirely. This Greek word meant and still means abyss, chasm, something wide, wide open. The first known to us Greek poet named Hesiod used the chaos word to describe the initial state of the world, before anything appeared or happened, basically before the world is created. In roughly this meaning, the concept of chaos was adopted into Judaism and subsequently Christianity. With the passage of time, chaos was gaining a wider and wider recognition and appreciation as a predecessor of everything happening in the world. Ramon Llull, a 13th century philosopher, mathematician, poet, had written the Book of Chaos, where he identified it as the primal form or matter created by God. 2 centuries later, Paracelsus, a Swiss alchemist, physician, one of the founding fathers of medical science and science in general, imagined chaos as a formless congestion of all elements: earth, water, wind, fire, and ether. Heinrich Hunrad, a disciple of Paracelsus, also an alchemist and a physician, believed that the light of the soul, by the will of the triune God, made all earthly things appear from the primal chaos. All in all, for thousands of years, chaos was understood as a generative power until the end of the 16th century, when an Englishman named Stephen Gusson, a former playwright turned into a satirical writer, used the word chaos in the meaning of complete disorder and utter confusion to ironically and sarcastically describe developments of the theatrical genres like comedy and melodrama. That usage had quickly caught on and spread like fire, maybe because it was an ironic, deliberately lowered use of a long-established highbrow word, or maybe because we people tend to simplify things, and the new word felt so suitable for seeming disorder of any kind. That's how we started to fear chaos and think of it as a counterpoint to all things clear, orderly, predictable. Now on to the second question. Why do we think that chaos is not important? Ironically, while chaos was losing its appeal and appreciation as the nature's ultimate generative power, the scientific revolution and the resulting industrial revolution was accelerating and progressing the civilization into the current state of affairs. By the middle of the 20th century, mankind had already learned how to fly, dropped several atomic bombs, and was planning to go to the moon and back, but still could not explain the very complex notions of the world that seemed unpredictable, erratic, irregular, in one word, chaotic. There were many wise men involved, but I'll mention just 3 of them: fractal geometrist Benoit Mandelbrot, meteorologist Edward Lorenz, and theoretical physicist Mitchell Feigenbaum. Their works and findings became a foundation for what was christened as chaos theory, one which was able to provide explanations for incredibly complex things like formation of clouds, or shaping of riverbeds, or why so many things in nature repeat themselves at micro and macro levels. So it took chaos 4 centuries to become officially readmitted to the scientific use, and from there, things started to develop with a fantastic speed. Once scientists got the new awareness of chaos, it has started to manifest itself in many different fields, and then it was suddenly everywhere. Pure science and applied science, natural science and social science, theory of literature and theory of film, theory of learning. The title and especially subtitle of this book pretty accurately describe my experience of few last weeks. Management and politics, finances and careers. And as if chaos theory of politics was not enough, army also got its share of chaos essentials. So the idea of chaos and its namesake theory started going far beyond the scientific fields that gave it birth, blossomed into a global cultural metaphor, becoming a part of the social cultural mainstream.
That thing this afternoon, I'm so angry. It was chaos, fucking chaos.
What are you talking about, huh? I mean, today was great. Chaos is great. Chaos is what killed the dinosaurs, darling. Face it, our way is the way. I mean, we scare people into not being assholes.
Our way is not our way.
Scientific ideas that become cultural metaphors are like medicine. They can be beneficial when taken in the right context and in the right dosage, or when taken in the wrong way, they can be harmful, or they, metaphors, not the ideas themselves, can be deemed useless and obsolete, like a grandma's medicine, a cure-all snake poison drink. Unfortunately, the idea of chaos went not just into pop culture, but into the shopping malls as well. And chaos became a commodity item. Everyone started to jump the chaos brand wagon. As of now, there are hundreds and hundreds of chaos brands. Some of them are pretty nice and sweet, actually. Like this recently emerged pet care brand. And I'm using the word sweet provisionally because you need to spray this particular cows and cuddles product to, quote opens, eliminate the worst smell known to mankind, the dog fart. We may call it by different names, the backdraft, the booty bomb, or the brown cloud, but the experience is the same, end of quote. Spray liberally, spray chaotically, spray with love. You can also smoke chaos, smell chaos, write chaos, drink chaos, make up chaos, paste chaos. You can also rent a chaos. And here chaos is the name of Spanish rent-a-bus company. No surprise though, since these are the people who invented corrida and street running from the bulls. Finally, you can get chaos at the half price. Boy, am I glad that they don't make chaos condoms yet. Or maybe they do actually. So, to sum it up, pop culturization, commodification, commercialization, keep diminishing chaos, make it feel banal and boring, almost devoid of any meaning. And this is why, more often than not, we underappreciate chaos for being too unimportant. Let's move on to the third and the final question of this talk. How can we make more use of chaos? Many of us don't feel creative or creative enough and persistently block or severely limit the action of creativity in much of our lives. Don't pay attention to the fact that I sound so sad. I'm not that sad. It's not just about delivering a solid result when you, for example, work in the creative industry. It's also about giving our kids an unexpected but hugely welcome surprise. It's about inspiring our partner with a non-routine act. It's about being ourselves and not being the schematized versions of ourselves. It's about breaking the mold of our own habits and patterns and avoid using great sounding cliches when giving a talk to an audience. We lose the chaotic, unpredictable, creative part of ourselves due to our obsession with control and power, due to our fear of mistakes, due to our precious egos, due to desire to remain within comfort zones, due to our continuous pursuit of pleasing and stimulating activities, and on and on and on. Yet, in each moment, we have the opportunity to psychologically re-enter our personal chaos state by letting go of prejudices, mechanical habits, images of self and others. In each moment, we can set up the possibility of a creative, self-organizing perception that puts us in touch with the new ideas and perspectives. Here is one, but very multi-sided approach which we can practice regularly in relatively easy ways. One caveat: your life and your ways still need to be structured. You just gotta find a way to put some chaos in. Intermittency. Even though we live in a world that tries to squeeze efficiency out of us in every moment, there's no sense to forget that it's not coming from me this time. There's no sense to forget that many societies give intermittency a hugely important role. It goes under the name of carnival or fiesta, an explosion of happy, creative chaos, a time for dressing up, eating, dancing, flirting, having a good time, or the best time of our lives, jumping over bonfires, doing the kick thing, and other general rule breaking within otherwise orderly social norms. Start making moments of chaos in your daily lives. Whatever you do, wherever you are, give yourself a short break. A recent research suggests that children are far more attentive in class after a short break, and that children are less attentive when there are long stretches of time between breaks. Having them every 40 or 50 minutes leads to better behavior and better learning. There's an interesting explanation to that, and it's not about the need to have a little rest. Children are more likely to disagree with one another in the relative social chaos of a lesson break than they are to disagree with a teacher in a structured classroom environment. Then kids disagree, they're confronted with someone else's point of view. They're forced to try to understand their friend's perspective and deal with the consequences, forming new skills and thinking patterns along the way. Essentially, the very same thing happens to us grown-ups when we take a break from our usual routines. Here's a 200-year-old quote from Nietzsche, the Uberman himself. The most important word in this quote is still. The notion and objective of still can still be achieved. Doing the same steps over and over again does not help our brains remain vibrant, elastic, and vital. Doing what we always do does not challenge our thinking. Doing the same thing day after day after day does not help build us new connections in our brains. Participating in activities that force us to improvise and think does. Start breaking away and create pockets of chaos. Change your patterns. Rewrite some of your code. Acquire a new habit. Sticking to it will definitely bring in some chaos. Nearly anything will work, like doing physical exercises, or waking up half an hour earlier, well, 2 hours earlier for me, or eating less but more often. Switch to using a tram if you're commuting on a bus. Start writing a diary. Bicycle your way to the office. Learn how to cook. Another approach to intermittency is to use so-called white spaces, also known as absent-mindedness or daydreaming or many other names. The method is generally simple. Work hard on something, give it a lot of your mental energy, and then free your mind from it completely. These are the moments then creative chaos comes in. This is how people have insights while having a shower. This is how Mendeleev saw his periodic table of elements while sleeping. A slacker, wasting away his days, has plenty of time to daydream, but rarely gain anything from white space. Yet a team or individual working against a tight deadline with seemingly no time to spare often benefit from staring into blank space or even taking an entire day off to think about something else. I have to warn you, the biggest enemies of white spaces and genuine absent-mindedness are your smartphone and your headphones. Both do a great job of stopping you from slipping into absent-mindedness. Don't take your phone with you when going down for a smoke. Start forgetting your headphones when you're getting out for a walk. Yet another way to intermittency is a multiple engagement. You can be engaged in different things with different people in the same office, or you can have several concurrently and constantly running creative activities of your own. Psychologists suggest that creative people often employ a network of enterprises, engaging in multiplicity of tasks that, although different, turn out to feed, inform, and inspire each other. Think about Leonardo da Vinci from the following perspective. He became what he was not because he was so gifted in so many things, but because his maintained interest to so many things created a lot of white spaces, feeding his inspiration and creativity. One more group intermittency approach, which is guaranteed to create micro white space, well, apart from bringing a lovely and adorable pet to a talk. Well, I was thinking about taking my own kid just for a random chaotic element, but then I decided that he will not tolerate this. We are almost, so one more group intermittency approach, which is guaranteed to create a micro white space. We are almost allergic to awkward silences. Because of that, when we ask a question, we give a person only a second or two before calling on someone next or simply moving on. When during a meeting you ask a question expecting ideas or suggestions, try giving participants more time for ideas to form and count silently, making sure not to look anybody in the eyes because it creates pressure. Try this approach with a 15 seconds or 1 minute silence. You might get really surprised with the quality of ideas appearing this way. By its very nature, organized, structured, contained chaos is imprecise, and managing a chaotic process is a demanding experience, especially if you are too fond of control. Doesn't matter whether you're a company CEO or a self-managed worker, create a pocket of chaos in your enterprise or your daily schedule and protect it, ensuring that the rest of the company or the rest of your day or even your hour is well structured and managed. Chaos is always here to help us adopt new strategies of life, get more from it, and give more to it. One last thing. Don't miss the opportunity and challenges of having more chance meetings. Meet more people more often. Networking is chaos. Chaos is networking. 24 hours a day it presents us with new twists, turns, and opportunities. May chaos be with you. That's all, folks. Shoot.
One. Yeah, so we have, always done here. We have 20 minutes for networking. And then thank you, Sergei, for your inspiring speech. There was actually loads of information. You're a very intense speaker.
It was too fast. Well, next time I'll be slow.
No. Okay, I will follow your advice and not to look to anyone's eyes. Do you have questions? I will give you, of course, time to think about it and maybe you come up with some ideas. We can ask about anything. It can be connected with chaos or personal, professional path and everything. Take your time, think about the questions, as it's the morning.
Don't look at them.
This is always yes, the habit. Like you ask, do you have questions, and then you start to look in the eyes. It's like kind of finding the. Okay, then. Okay.
What is your perspective on role of chaos in personal life? So a lot of your talk has been about embracing it like in kind of personal life, but what about how chaos manifests itself in the company's process, for example? Well, for example, when you work in a company, as I understand, your experience includes like working in a companies where you needed like to deliver a certain results. So how do you manage chaos in this case, where chaos can be like really destructive in the end, if it's not properly managed? I guess my question is about balance. How do you find proper balance?
You have to try. Like, no pain, no gain. It's better to regret about something you have done than to regret about something you haven't done. Meaning that finding a balance is always a tricky thing, almost in any area or any activity. Every small step is still a step. So, like the suggestion about the meetings and the awkward silence, or whatever, the forced awkward silence. Try starting with that. I've been to, well, most of us here have been to thousands of meetings, and meetings are famous for people talking all the time, sometimes for hours and hours and hours. Maybe try setting up a meeting where you have the time limit set, let's say 15 minutes. And out of these 15 minutes, let's say this meeting is sectioned into 3 sections. And before second and the first section have a short, not a break, but a silence thinking break, and see what happens after this. Because the matter of fact that we people quickly adapt to whatever is around us. And once you've had this meeting once or twice, people will no longer consider it as the chaotic element, but will start seeing it as a generative element, and this will help build a platform for the next step. I'm speaking from my own experience here.
Actually, this is a very small dog. It's not a big one, but it's making lots of voice. So I will continue with this question, as I also have one. As you work lots of with creative people, like the ones who generate, I guess, ideas. I have a question: how on the just a second. For example, on the meeting when people generate, lots of ideas, and it happens like, oh, I have this idea, and then I have this one, and that one. How, how do you limit maybe them and try to put them together and follow one direction? If you understand what I mean.
I guess I do. Well, one thing is a creative brief. So if a team is supposed to have a meeting on a specific assignment, usually they have a brief to work upon. So basically, the way to filter the ideas would be their relevance or irrelevance to the brief, unless people start or bring in some totally outstanding or just next step ideas which are beyond or wider and bigger than a brief. But there are, well, brief is an obvious part of any creative process, because without a written brief, nobody is committed to anything, neither the person who briefs you nor the person who is getting briefed, because this is like oral briefing is nothing. Oh, I forgot that you mentioned that. Oh, I forgot to mention that, and things like that. But apart from having a brief, there are lots of approaches to have structured meetings still, even though if it's an idea review session, it's a very easy task, because basically you, let's say, for example, you encourage everyone to come up with loads of ideas. And then basically you will have to do some kind of selection. But afterwards, first you hit all the ideas and ask everyone to put them on sticky notes and put all these notes on the wall. When the time for selection comes, basically have a vote for each of the, or ask people to sit down silently for a minute and pick 5 best ideas from the pool. And then just count the votes, the marks on the ticks on the sticky notes. Basically those ideas who get most ticks get to the next stage. And it will work fairly and squarely when people know in advance that you will this selection approach, and so on.
Okay, so it's still organizing. I mean, this is we are narrowing, talking about house, that it's your organizing house, right?
Yeah, it's like there are many names: contained chaos, or organized chaos, or intended chaos. It sounds a slightly different thing, but yes, we as people, as individuals, we have some obligations to ourselves, first of all. So even if we don't need to tend for a family member or a pet, we still need to wake up, make up our bed, brush our teeth. Nobody asks us to brush our teeth. We all know people who maybe sometimes don't, but we do. This is already an element of structure, right? Like changing your clothes, or using your phone not just to check the Facebook updates, but to set the alarm clock, things like that. It's all elements of structure. We are not allergic to structured and ordered approaches. It's just that within the course of time, we got so conditioned into the structures and orders and all kind of set up things that we forgot that we need to let chaos into the structures in a controlled way.
Okay, thank you. Okay. See hand? You raise your hands if you have questions, so I knew where to come next.
Or shout.
Hello. It works. All right. I wanted to ask you a question of how do you implement chaos in parenting? Do you implement it or no? Because you said you have a child, and you said it's important to have chaos in every aspect of your life. And parenting and upbringing children can be quite complicated or tricky in this sense.
Well, if I said that it's important to have chaos in every aspect of my life, I was mistaken, because it becomes a too rigid structure. It's important to have chaos in many aspects of your life. And answering your question, how do I implement chaos in
parenting?
In parenting, yeah, that's right. Because I was going to say dealing with my kid, which is not as good as parenting. Well, like my own example has just shown, it's nice not to stick to the whatever's own presets and patterns. Like, it's not dealing with my kids. It's like, it's not making him happy all the time. It's just trying not to be either self-programmed or programmed by him or her in whatever you do. I love to when weather allows, take my sons to the school on a bicycle. Unfortunately, they're growing up too fast at this age, but still possible the younger child. And whenever possible, or not whenever possible, sometimes I try to change the routes. Sometimes I'm trying to change they have free helmets for some reason. There are 2 of them, but they have free helmets. I change the helmets. Or actually, many kids like food art. So
Like
when you
what?
food art, like
Food
when
art.
you do fried eggs and the sausage in some funky, non-trivial way. It all boils down to a matter of balance. You cannot do the funky stuff all the time. You cannot do the predictable or the stuff you did too many times already all the time.
But do you consciously like teach them about chaos and its importance in life? Do you explain to them that?
Well, what I do consciously teach them about is about the importance of being creative in whatever they do, be it a home assignment or a postcard for mommy or whatever. I started my career in advertising as a self-taught person, and that made me believe that every person is creative. It's not it just takes effort. Well, it takes a chance, a good chance, to discover it. If you haven't discovered it by, let's say, the age of this or the age of that. But overall, you should have no doubt. Well, I should not assume that any of you think that you are not creative. But when you meet a person who is like claiming proudly that he is not creative, trying to find the order to chaotic way to help him or her see himself or herself from the other angle and understand that it's just his fear of making mistake, his lack of inclination to go outside comfort zone and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You talked about organizing the chaos with briefs, but let's take a step back. And I have a question about your creative process. How do you tame the chaos in your head? So before all these ideas become briefs, when you have a problem you need to solve, and then you get all these ideas about what to do, how do you tame that side?
Well, I used to be, and I'm still to a huge extent a library kid. What I do first usually is I delve into loads of various directly related and seemingly unrelated information. I try to absorb it. I try to make some bottom line of it. But also I look out for some random things which come out of it. I'm sometimes too rigid in this approach because I unfortunately sometimes spend too much time on reading the materials instead of defining what to do next and proceed. But other than that, this is my case into case thing. So I read a lot, I look a lot, I check a lot. Well, in terms of my professional occupation, it's also another benefit of this is that a lot of material which I browse through is actually very helpful for the team which will be working on the project. Let's say I'm preparing brief for. So it does not go in vain even if I fail my post-analysis and formulating stage.
Right. So research is everything.
Yes, sure. I mean, like they say, and forget my French, assumptions are the mothers of all fuck-ups. So yes, we need to research.
Thank you.
Any more hands? Don't see. Okay, we have. Okay, thank you.
Hi. How can you sustain creativity over long periods of time?
Please come again.
How can you sustain creativity over long periods of time?
I'm still not getting it. I'm sorry.
How can you sustain creativity for a long time? Right?
Well, it's like cooking or doing professional or amateur sports or nearly any other more or less complex activity, you have to keep doing it. You have to, well, not only you have to keep doing it, but you have to train yourself for doing it in a better way, more efficient way, more unexpected way. So basically you train a lot and you do a lot, and by this you becoming better and better, let's say, in your creativity, like you keep flexing your creative muscle all the time and it becomes stronger. But then, like obviously we all, even, what's his name? Usain Bolt has to retire. And now he is not sitting absent-minded, he is trying to get himself into a football club, which is a very commendable decision because he set an example for so many young aspiring athletes who may not become mega athletes, but now they will have an example of how to proceed from not fulfilling their dream and becoming, let's say, a runner, and they can try something which is adjacent, directly adjacent, or something which is not really related, and but still flex that muscle that which was involved. So in my case, I guess my way to sustain my creativity and keep it blooming, hopefully, was to switch or attempt to switch to a field of interaction design, which has some things in common with advertising creativity, but a whole new world of its own.
What are some unconventional ways for increasing creativity? What are some unconventional ways for increasing creativity?
I bring my apologies. It's something with my hearing aid today.
You want to maybe what are do you hear me now? Because maybe you can. Okay, what are unconventional ways to increase your creativity?
Well, there are no unconventional ways. It's only labels and text which people put to some. I mean, everything in terms of ways has been done already. Like the surrealists early in 20th century, they would not go to toilets like for several days to keep. Well, at least there's an anecdote about like. Not a historical, but anecdotal evidence about that. Well, maybe they urinated a little bit, but the purpose of keeping the feces in was to actually to start poisoning yourself with what's inside you, so that it would take your creativity beyond this realist world to the surrealist world. I never tried it. I'm not a surrealist. I'm a practical and pragmatic person. So, but. There are so many, like, what you gonna do after this talk? May I ask you a question?
I check my to-do list and I like tackle it.
It's somewhere written, right, in the file or in the smartphone?
It's on my phone and my computer.
Okay, can you try to, after this meeting, to take a piece of paper and a pen and try to memorize it. Along the way, adding to it something else which may start coming up. And if you usually do this kind of whatever, compiling to-do list in a specific place or in a specific context, can you try to change the context and see what comes out of it? Maybe you will reprioritize what you have in your to-do list. Maybe something new will come up. Maybe something will drop from this to-do list. I have this thing with to-do list. I have like dozens of them, and they keep overlapping. And then sometimes I compile them together in one mega list, and then I put it away. But then a few years later, I run through it, and I find at least some solace, seeing that at least half of the things which I planned to do during years is now done. But frankly, I'm still retraining myself into proper time planning and to doing and things like that. Might be not the best person to answer this. Oh, well, actually, it was not your question, but still.
Well, he answered. Okay, do we have any more questions or ideas to share, actually. Okay, we have, I think, time for 1 or 2 questions.
Hi, I have a question about more of your personal opinion. There are a lot of books like how to avoid chaos in your personal life, how to avoid chaos in your studies. So why is that people are so scared of chaos and they try to avoid it like at all cost? What do you think? What is your personal opinion on that?
Well, there are at least 2 sides to answer this question. The first answer is that we are trained to be scared, like chaos is the enemy of all things which we believed are synonyms of order, the harmony. So when we hear something which is not similar to what we usually hear, we may find it a cacophony of sounds, a chaotic amalgamation, instead of trying to look at it from a different angle, or listening to it from a different angle, or check out the original intention, because lots of music which is coming from, let's say, the third world, have a specific purpose. Like there is a funeral music, there is a wedding music, there is music for that, there is music for communicate with this or that tribe. Sometimes it works without any context, sometimes it does not. But we are primed and conditioned not to pay attention to these details, so instead we just call it chaos and start running away from it. As for the books, endless books, how to do this and how to do that, how, well, it's capitalism, right? People, well, like there's a closed circuit of every, like there is a publishing house, there is a writer, there are editors, there are readers, there are paper manufacturers, there are electronic books manufacturers. Everyone is involved, everyone gets his share, his or her share of profit. So as long as there are readers, and there will be readers, because we are trained to not to work on ourselves, but to not necessarily to work on ourselves, but keep listening to advices and reading this kind of books instead of doing at least the first step of following this advice, not just reading this or that book.
Thank you. More questions? Okay, I have the last one question then. You always, like, we spoke about the order and organizing, but I have the question: how actually to bring house more to your work life? And do you think that I personally believe that many problems in our world are because we adults forgot how to be kids in some things. Like we forgot how to be more playful. And maybe you have some advices. Like I actually myself have a problem because I believe that sometimes I'm more too childish than like being adult and more chaotic than being organized. But do you have any advice for those who are pretty organized and do everything by to-do list and kind of very well structured, how to step out and actually bring more house and be more childish? Maybe from your experience with kid, I don't know, for parenting as well. Or you're super organized also, and everything is on.
Oh, I'm both yes and no. Well, it might be the easiest way is just to do some of the things you used to do as a child. Like in childhood, we were more likely to chase a bus we are getting late for and run for it. And that in itself gives like people, there is a saying that chasing a bus is much more exhilarating and exciting than getting onto this bus. So when you need not to miss a bus and you see the bus is approaching and you still have this distance, try to run for it. Go to a zoo and feed some animals. Don't prepare at all for your next meeting and see what comes out of it. But I guess like, if it's just one short advice, stay curious and act upon your curiosity. So whatever you see, whatever you feel, whatever you need to know, ask questions, accept challenges. For children, there is nothing, literally not a single thing which is not possible. So children see the world in such a way that everything can be done right here, right now, maybe by tonight. You come up and I'll show you my spacesuit and my spaceship. So don't act like a child, be a child.
Okay, thank you. We actually have one last question. Very
Excellent.
interesting.
I'm mad for organizing and I really can't let go. What about implementing like a chaos hour in your plan, or like a chaos or a new horizons exploring category in your system, you know? Like maybe as a widely important goal or something?
Maybe. The last one?
I mean, like, have you read Essentialism? It postulates that you need to set widely important goals, and everything else is trash, you know? So that's the other spectrum of it, but I mean, like...
Well, goal setting is important. I mean, it's... Goal setting is a way to live a basically mindful living, right? Living. And chaos is just one of the ways to approach this. In case of some goals, might be the most effective way to get closer to fulfilling these goals. In some ways, maybe not, but there is no direct relation between this and that. At least I don't see it. It's just a way to, I mean, the chaos, or bringing chaos in, is the way to achieve your goals. And I think it works for many goals.
Do you practice like this chaos time on your schedule?
I've actually, I made my own to-do system and I've used it for 7 years, and I've read every book about productivity and to-do management. I started off with getting things done like 15 years ago as a child, so that's maybe I have the trauma. But yeah, I practice essentialism, 4 disciplines of execution.
You practice what?
4 disciplines of execution. It's like a framework of executing stuff. So it's very structured, but I found out like I've managed over 50,000 to-dos with my system. I only have 10,000 to go, so just a few centers left. But I noticed that if you structure and categorize and organize your entire day, your entire life, you're gonna get stagnated. There's no like exploration. I think chaos is really good for that, but it needs to be contained.
Well, I may agree, but also may disagree with this. I just read a book about writers who, like literary writers who have their own processes, like Ernest Hemingway would. We would not mention what it ended up with.
Do you mean The War of Art?
I mean
the book.
The book, yeah, the book writers.
Yeah.
So Ernest Hemingway, he would start his everyday with sharpening 20 pencils just before he will start to work. And basically, that was his process to start the work. But that was also his approach to fight neuroticisms of his work. But also, I suspect that sharpening pencils actually is this absent-minded thing. You don't really think about, like, you don't think, I'm going to use this pencil to write down about this person. You just, and that's when something chaotic may come in. For other person, for other writer, I can't recall his name at the moment, it was just a coffee, bowel movement, and then write.
Well,
but having a process, more likely than not, warrants the appearance of these white spaces between the stages of the process. Because when you know and you do it for 20 years that you're gonna have a coffee and then do a bowel movement, you do it almost automatically, but that creates the white space moment between stages.
13, yeah. Actually, Stephen Pressfield discusses it in his really short book. I recommend it to everyone, The War of Art. It's about writers getting over a writer's block, but it basically applies to everyone who's actually doing work with their brains. I think everyone's having the same thing. And I can't remember the name of the author, but the author of The Dome and The Fog, and like really like the American author that's really prolific. He's written like hundreds of books. He leaves like an easy concept half finished the last day, and he starts off the next day. So it's like you need to have starting routines that activate the same area in your brain, the same neurons, so it would be easier for them to access what's the state of yesterday, maybe.
That's how our brain works, actually. It's been proven that we have several, let's say, circuits in brain. One for like active ideation, and one which gets activated when this one gets switched off.
Yeah, and the more you do something, the more the neurons are covered in myelin, and the stronger the connection, the less noise they get from outside.
True that. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you share the name of the books maybe after the event?
And the name of the framework and like
I have a few
everything
hundred-
you've just said.
I have a few hundred books. If you want, I can give you my card. I read 100 books a year, and I can recommend you like for every topic about productivity and psychology and anthropology. And if you want to use Pirate Bay, maybe, then I have a small page of text about what apps to use. Where I read all books with audio. Like if I don't find an audiobook, I get an ebook for LibGen, and then the TTS will read it for me. And it's like, unless the book has lots of images. But I've read books like that. If it has an image, I put it on pause. I listen to another book, I go to the computer, watch the image, and continue. Because I listen to like 10 books parallel. So the key to reading books is 10 books in parallel, because you get bored of one subject anyway. And if you find your mind wandering, increase the speed. I listen to like 200, 300%. 500 is, I can listen to it, but I can't do anything else. But 200, 300, I can drive, I can shop, I can do housework. Yeah. Stack your time.
I envy you, but only half the time.
Okay, that's very cool advice. Then we need actually to wrap up because it's already 10. And if you need to go to work, of course, you are
Then don't.
free to go. We have a small present for Sergei. Yes.
Thank you.
This is a small bag from Colorodot. And here is the chaos, so it will be always with you, we hope. Thank you. And you can also come here and we can see the sketches of our amazing artists. And later we will share with you also the link and all this, the link of artists and more pictures on our Facebook page and on our Flickr account as well. So you can, we are finished. Thank you so much for coming. Have a nice